Because centaurs have 2 porch pouches doesn't mean that you can smash them. So let's look at the mating manual in order to talk about the anatomy and, more importantly, culturally, why you may have a hard time getting it on with a centaur. And yes, this will be applicable to men and women who are interested in getting it on with the opposite gender of a centaur. So real quickly, let's look at the anatomy of a centaur and talk about why a human can in fact get it on with a centaur but still won't make it that easy. Because back when the Fae were actually making the centaur race viable with the second round of impregnations, look up their origin story if you don't know what I'm talking about. Or just join the guild in order to learn about their origins, because we have basically a whole page going over the creation story of them. In a cruel twist of fate, the Great Faes gave the centaurs 2 porch pouches in order to accommodate humanoids that connect directly to the spole here on the bottom half, and then the upper part, which is for centaurs and horses. Because as we've discussed in prior videos, centaurs can give birth to humans, centaurs, and horses, all dependent on if they use the proper channel for their goo gum, and each of the teamies deem the sperm of going on into the next process. But culturally, in the Great Collection, which is where the Devil's Deal series takes place, there is a ton of bad blood between druids, shamans, and the residents of the Chaos Plains. Because in the First Defiance War, where the mortals did not want Ezeron, Glace, and Anaru watching over the Chaos Plains, and initiated a massive war that resulted in 6.6 Texases, the forest land being destroyed by our lovely, tall, dommy-mommy, tatted up orc lady petals. That whole conflict raised a ton of bad blood that exists hundreds of years afterward because, one, they don't forget. They live a long time unless they're killed. And they pass the lessons that they learned during the Great War on to their descendants, including centaurs. And the Fae have made sure that the centaurs know that their half-mortal origin is a very traumatic one at that. It's only reinforced because if the soul hunters actively catch a centaur outside of the groves, there's a good chance that they're just going to kill the centaur like they do to any good heretic, or they'll put them into the Anarch Land Slave Association and use them as cattle. So during the foreign species breeding section, where they took 80 human, dwarf, orc, and elves with a centaur from the actual band that they are organizing in, they found quite a shocking number of things in terms of cultural reception to outsiders. The first thing of note is that they only got 65 of 80 participants from the Chaos Plane. Because in a couple of the mounting sessions, some of the Chaos Plane's residents actually intentionally tried to harm the centaurs. You had everything from some of the men trying to use the poop chute and other entries that the female centaur didn't want. And probably the most famous case is a human woman walked in with a bladed device in her hoo-ha and allowed a male centaur to stick it in there as a way to punish centaurs. And the reason this was such a prominent thing and why these people were so adamant to hurt the centaurs is because the Chaos Plains views harming Fae and spiritual people like druids and shamans as their civic duty. The only reason they signed up for these sexual sessions is as a way to do their civic duty to hurt the Fae. It wasn't just the Chaos Plains individuals that were being very aggressive toward their counterparts, because it was found that centaur males would use the length of their massive members to forcefully just go as hard as they could to hurt the Chaos Plains women as a way to effectively get their own lick back for the trauma that was inflicted on their people. And the female centaurs would purposely antagonize men into doing things that they found gross, such as, putting their face and licking the chocolate cavern. Or they would stand at their full height to not help the Chaos Plains member be able to insert the gear appropriately. And in some cases, the women would accidentally slip and then drop their full weight on that person. But do you remember how I said that there were 65 out of 80 participants that were from the Chaos Plains? Well, there were human, dwarf, orc, and forest elves that were either shamans, druids, or from the Precious Lands, which is the Holy Land where the nature planar spirits reside. And they brought them in to fill out the 80. And what they found is that these 15 individuals did not have any of the same issues that the Chaos Plains individuals had. Females would actively lower themselves to help them be able to mount up appropriately. The male centaurs would be a lot more gentle and aware of the conditions of their female counterpart. And there was a ton more dialogue exchanged between the centaurs and the planar spirit individuals versus the Chaos Plains, who just kind of went in, did their thing, had some kind of aggression going on, and then parted the ways. Out of those 65 Chaos Plains individuals, there was only really one overwhelmingly positive experience, and that was by a human Chaos Plains man who had made an effort to spend 30 minutes talking to her. Even though that the female Centaur just wanted to get it over with, he basically put her in a situation where they had to talk before he would engage. And as time went on, she became more receptive to their conversations, avoiding topics such as religion and nationality. And what ended up happening is the Centaur eventually would lower herself to accommodate his height, and they actually ended up having a very pleasant experience. And the thing is, there is so much animosity. At the end of the day, after all the tests were done, only 60% of the Chaos Plains men actually went through and had smecks with Centaur women because they were so put off by their behavior and animosity. And out of the 60% who engaged in the fun time, only 30% actually ended up coming across the finish line, if you know what I mean. But the big thing to note is that compared to their male counterparts, the Chaos Plains women were much bigger troopers in terms of being prone to going the full length. They were determined to complete their job while they were there, compared to the 40% of men who bowed out before they even jumped into the pool. At the end of the day, the big thing to remember is that if you want to smash a Centaur, there's a lot of social, cultural, historical, and religious events that are going to coat your experience. And depending on where you are from, what classification you have, and how you go about meeting them will dictate whether you have a good time or a very, very painful time. The Centaur entry is officially out now in the mating manual for your review to give me feedback on what you think, so go ahead and grab a Ruby Gold sub if you want to check it out, or get an original character in the book by grabbing a diamond. But you can read the stories where all this world lore comes from by checking out the Devil's Deal and Night of Slaughter mangas. And I am working on volume 2 of each series right now.